This is a podfic for Tony Did Not Anticipate This, written by Spidergirl1809 on Ao3, read by Alextris. Chapter 5. Tony finally says thank you. The eerie after-battle silence drifted over everyone. Drones draped lifelessly across overturned tables, while splintered wood and shattered glass cluttered the floor. Steve's heart pounded. He lowered his shield from its protective stance, not quite ready to give up on defending Peter and Tony, but well aware there was nothing to defend from anymore. "It's over," Peter croaked. At the angle his body curled into Tony's, his right ear faced Steve, along with the blood that dragged from it. "Yeah, kid," Tony whispered, thumb stroking Peter's bangs. "It's over." Taking that as permission to move, Steve grabbed his communicator from its spot on the back of his shield. He didn't know if everyone's tech would be online again, so that was the first thing to address. "Team, anyone read me?" Clint's voice crackled through. "What the hecking shit just happened?" Steve didn't know how to answer that. "Steve," Sam said, "please tell me you and Tony found Spider-Kid." He answered that more easily. "Yeah, he's with us. We've shut down the drones and Tim is dead. Someone find out if first responders are up and running. Spider-Man needs medical attention. We should also send a team to check on civilians." Clint let out a startled squeak. "I'm on it," Natasha snapped, presumably having stolen Clint's comms. "Is Spider-Man okay?" "We'll make sure he is." Steve didn't want to say anything else with Peter right there. Even if he looked better now, they didn't know the extent of the injuries yet. Steve didn't want him to panic, though he worried less about Peter panicking than Tony, who was the closest to tears that Steve had ever seen him. The cold plastic of the oxygen mask squished against Peter's face. Now that he was less focused on gasping for air, Peter noticed other sensations in his body, like how his ears hurt and how every noise made him want to sob. His throat was raw and sharp from coughing, and he'd probably broken his ribs based on the way they throbbed. He shivered. So cold. But Mr. Stark was warm, so that was nice. Peter's lungs felt stiff, his brain stuffed with cotton. But breathing was good. It was so good. He wished he could hug it. Unfortunately, Peter couldn't hug oxygen because that wasn't how air worked. Maybe he'd super cool some oxygen in Mr. Stark's lab. Then it'd be solid enough to hug. "Peter? Peter!" Noise. Why couldn't the noise go away? "Peter!" Oh, wait, it was Mr. Stark. He blinked. "Huh?" "Stay with us. Natasha's on her way with medical." "Stay with them? But I'm right here." Mr. Stark sighed. "Yeah, I know, bud." Captain America pressed 2 fingers to Peter's neck. It seemed an odd thing to do, but maybe that was just how people greeted each other in 1942. He poked him back. Boop. Captain America frowned. "His pulse is really fast." "Hypoxia, probably. That poison should have killed him." Mr. Stark muttered. "Hey, Pete, how are you feeling?" He hovered closer, meaning the noise came closer, which made Peter groan. "Stop talking!" "Excuse me?" Mr. Stark sounded offended. "Oops. Super hearing," Captain America whispered. "Oh, right." The noise outside the building grew steadily too. Sirens dug at his eardrums. He clapped his hands over his ears. The oxygen mask he'd been holding fell, but Mr. Stark caught it, squishing it back onto Peter's nose and mouth. He said something, but words weren't making much sense anymore. Someone tossed open the door. A rush of red hair. The person sounded angry. No, livid. Peter curled in on himself at the volume, then gasped when the movement twinged his battered ribs. Everyone's voices lowered after that. With the adrenaline from earlier gone, he ached with tiredness. It settled deep into his muscles and pricked at his watering eyes. More talking. Hands were moving him. Someone covered his face with fabric. Secret identity, he thought. The last thing he heard was Mr. Stark's voice. "You're gonna be fine, kid. It's gonna be fine." The waiting room around Tony was nothing but silence and empty chairs. He folded forward on a stiff sofa, head in his hands. Peter would be fine. Dr. Cho said so. Still, Tony knew he'd never get rid of that image. Peter, a wet sack in Steve's arms, covered in blood. Analytics came back. The blood dust belonged to Archibald Humphreys, a chemist who disappeared in a gas explosion 3 years ago. Also known as Tim, Tony assumed. He'd have to talk to Peter about that later. The sofa indented as someone sat down next to him. Tony knew without even looking who it was. "How's Peter?" Steve said. "He's gonna be fine." Steve breathed deeply through his nose, eyes closing briefly. That's good." Peter was a wonder, the way he wormed himself into people's hearts. And there was Steve Rogers, sitting next to him. Tony spent the past several months running over and over in his head all the things he wanted to say to Steve, some of which he'd said since they'd resolved the Accords issues, many of which he hadn't. But then there was Peter, the damn stubborn kid, on the other side of the wall behind them, safe and alive. There really was only one thing left to say at this point. "Thank you." "Huh?" Steve said. "Don't make me say it again. But yeah, thank you for looking out for Peter. If you hadn't been there..." Steve fixed his gaze on a forested painting on the opposite wall. "He's a good kid." The air hung tense between them. Tony clenched his hands into the ball. "I didn't try to open the chamber right away," he admitted. "I waited until the decontamination process was complete. What if he died?" "We can't dwell on what ifs, Tony. It doesn't It matters!" He turned to face Steve. "I brought him into this. That means I'm responsible for him, and I was about to let him die." Steve's undivided attention was overwhelming. It had always been that way. The intensity of his eye contact, the way he listened with his entire body, the stern sincerity in his voice. "It was the right call, Tony. If you opened the chamber before the process was finished, everyone would have died, not just Peter." "He was fine anyway," went unsaid. "You couldn't open the door without me anyway," also went unsaid. Without warning, Natasha tossed open the double doors of the waiting room with a thunderous bang. She stormed in, eyes ablaze. "You!" She jabbed her finger at Tony. "How dare you!" Tony startled to his feet. His instinct was to defend himself, even though he knew there was no defending this. "Natasha," Steve began, standing up as well. No, don't you start, Steve. Don't tell me how to feel about this. I can have my opinions." She marched right up to Tony, pressing her finger into his sternum. "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't," he admitted, perhaps too flippantly. "You said you were getting back up in Germany. You didn't tell me anything about him, or that he was 15, because you knew I'd say no." "He was 14 then, actually." Was probably the least helpful response right now. Natasha scoffed. She shoved Tony away like he was poison. "Natasha, I thought I told you to can it, Rogers." He slammed his mouth shut. "You knew my history," Natasha said. She looked away. "How could you possibly trick me into working with a child soldier? Me?" The truth was, Tony hadn't considered that until she said it now. She hadn't been on his mind, or the Red Room, or how cruel it was to make her complicit in this. Just like it didn't occur to him until he saw the floor of Peter's room littered with Legos, until he saw the body lying too still on the airport tarmac, how young 14 was. Or maybe that was what he wanted to believe, that he hadn't thought of it, that he was short-sighted on the task at hand. It made him feel better, perhaps. The truth was, he'd been aware enough to hide Peter's age from everyone, and too selfish not to drag him along. He told himself it was best for the kid. Better than someone worse grabbing him up, anyway. "I'm sorry, Nat." Her face melted, and crossed arms fell to her sides. "He's so young and sweet. He's too good for us, Tony." Tony didn't have a response to that. She was right. He didn't have to, though, because the door flew open again, and in came Clint, Rhodey, and Sam. "Please tell me our little hooligan's okay," Clint said. "Yeah," Tony said. "Yeah, Dr. Cho said he's going to be fine in a few days." "Oh, good fuck." He slotted himself next to Natasha, reminding Tony that the two of them were, as usual, on the same page. "I take it Nat appropriately berated you, so we don't have to?" "Yeah, I've been scolded." "Fantastic." "Oh, I'm gonna scold you more later," Rhodey said. "Because as your best friend, it's my responsibility to tell you that you effed up good this time. You are never doing something like this again." "I'd expect nothing less." "Am I allowed to talk now?" Steve asked. A cautious smirk spread across Natasha's face. "I'll allow it." Before he could, though, May Parker stuck her head out of Peter's room. Everyone fell silent. Poor May stood there bearing the full force of 6 Avengers' expectant gaze. She took it like a champ, though. "Ah, he's asking for you, Tony. I think it's important." "Oh, okay, on it." Peter sat propped upright on a stack of pillows that Aunt May set for him. She'd also tucked the sheets of the hospital bed around his legs. That, combined with Black Widow shouting outside his door, made him feel a lot younger than 15. He watched Mr. Stark slip into the room. He looked tired, with strands of hair shuffled out of place. He must have been running his fingers through it, the way he did when he was anxious and thought no one was watching. Peter never knew what to do when he looked like that. Usually, he'd just ignored it. "Hey, Mr. Stark." "What's up, kid?" Tony slid himself into the plush chair at the side of Peter's bed, the one May had occupied moments earlier. "Your aunt said you had something to talk about?" "Right, yeah." Mr. Stark stared expectantly. The words weighed on his chest, stuck in his throat before he finally forced them out. "I killed Tim." "Yeah, I meant to ask you about that. What happened?" "He kind of exploded." "He exploded?" "Yeah." Mr. Stark sat back, digesting that. "All right, how does that happen?" "He didn't have gas bombs on him. He was the gas. I told him not to. He didn't listen. I think he just wanted to kill me, or have the last laugh or whatever." "Yeesh, that's intense." He said it too coolly. "I guess." Tim's wide grin and stormy eyes almost gleeful as he evaporated into nothing. "How are you, feeling about that?" "I don't know. Not good." Nothing was there anymore. But if Peter glanced down at his body, he could almost see the bright blood dust saturating him. "Makes sense." Mr. Stark's expression was unreadable. He leaned forward. "Listen, we can go through the details of what happened later. We'll need them for the mission report. But for now, let's just... We can focus on you, okay?" "Right." "Okay, good." Mr. Stark kept watching Peter, dark eyes intense, mouth squeezed into a line. Peter didn't have anything else to say about it, though, so he changed the topic. "I heard you guys arguing about me." "Yeah, figured you might have." "It didn't take super hearing." Mr. Stark snorted. "Yeah, I guess not," he said. "Listen, kid, don't worry about all..." He waved his hand at the door. "That. You probably figured this from the beatdown at the airport, but the team has some complex politics going on." Peter did worry, though, because they weren't arguing about politics. They were arguing about him. They were mad at Mr. Stark for him. They're going to make you leave me, aren't they? Even to his own ears, he sounded like a desperate orphan. Mr. Stark wasn't his dad, who died when Peter was 5, and he definitely wasn't Ben. But he was something. Peter liked having that something, whatever it was. For a second, Mr. Stark's face fell. Sadness? Guilt? He covered it quickly with a scoff. No, unfortunately for us both, we're stuck together. And now you're going to have the entire team wrapped around your little spidery finger. Your gravitational pull is too strong, Underoos. I imagine it'll be a while before you get called on to a mission, though. Unless I sneak along again? He would. They both knew it. Yeah, we are definitely implementing a check for stowaways protocol. Yeah, like that'll deter me. Mr. Stark sighed. You're aware of what a pain in the neck you are, right? I swear I age 10 years every time we talk. Peter shrugged. The conversation lulled. Mr. Stark turned his head away, arms folded and eyes thoughtful. Then, you did the right thing, you know. Huh? You didn't really kill him anyway. You made it so that he couldn't hurt anyone else, and he made his own choices. That's not on you. Does it matter if it's on me or not? With great power came great responsibility, and Peter always knew responsibility wouldn't mean easy choices. Tim wasn't a good person. He deserved what happened to him. But he was still dead. Peter still ended up covered in blood. None of that changed. There wasn't more to say, so neither of them did. Still, it was nice to have Mr. Stark's company. "You're Spider-Man's mum?" Natasha asked. The woman had wood-brown hair in a relaxed ponytail and a small mouth pulled into a forced smile. Natasha fumed on her behalf. Her kid almost died because of Tony's recklessness. His aunt, but yes, I'm May Parker. There weren't a lot of happy reasons kids got raised by their aunt instead of their mum. Natasha filed that information away in her mental folder about Spider-Man. It went right next to her other notes like talks even more than Tony and is as stubborn as Steve. She didn't know what to make of this new information yet. "How is he?" Steve asked. "Recovering, although I suggest you keep any future arguments a bit further away from his super hearing." The team shrunk, chastised. Granted, Natasha was the only one who'd been yelling. She didn't feel bad about it. Maybe it had knocked some sense into the little punk. Accordingly, Spider-Man's aunt turned to Natasha. "Walk with me?" "Sure," she said. They headed down the hall to a nurse's station in the back. May had every right to be as pissed at Tony as Natasha was. She didn't look it, though. She kept her arms loose at her side, her posture relaxed despite the tense lines on her forehead. "We'll talk quietly," May said, pulling up chairs from the desks for them to sit on. Natasha sat across from May. She studied this new woman, her ovular face, her fitted yet casual clothes. She seemed tired, but only because Natasha observed closely. That tiredness about her was something she hid expertly, like she had done this for years. With Spider-Man for a kid, maybe she had. More interestingly, Natasha felt May's gaze back on her, studying with the same scrutiny. That didn't happen often, much less with a civilian. There was more to May Parker than met the eye. "So, it sounds like you've taken a shine to my Peter." Peter. That'd be Spider-Man's name then. She remembered what she thought when she saw him draped half-conscious in Tony's arms. Look at his little face. When Natasha was his age, she'd already killed a dozen people. No one deserved to have their childhood stolen like that. And Peter? With his useful energy, his smart little quips, the way he interacted so easily with that little girl and her mum. Natasha couldn't stand the thought of tampering with any of that. "You don't seem particularly upset about any of this," Natasha said. "About you liking him? No, why would I be?" She was playing coy. She knew precisely what Natasha meant. You know what I mean.
Ah, well, I got all that out in October. Believe me, your spat with Tony was nothing compared to mine.
Funnily, Natasha did believe that. I don't get it, then. She allowed the cold rage to simmer beneath her voice. You're his parent. You should be fighting tooth and nail to keep him out of this. People die in this line of work. He should be at school or, I dunno, I don't even know what kids do. Because she never got to be a kid.
That's what the secret identity is for.
I don't get it, she repeated. May's voice quieted. She looked down at her hands.
Life doesn't always work how you want it to. I've lost enough to know that. So has Peter.
There was a story there. Probably the same story behind why Peter lived with his aunt and not his mum and dad.
He's good out there.
He does good for people. That's what his uncle and I always taught him to do. His uncle, who was notably not here with Peter in the hospital now. I can't stop him if I wanted to. Believe me, I want to. Teenagers are a lot. Sometimes the best you can do is put guardrails in place and be there to catch them when they fall. I don't have all the tools for that anymore, but Tony does. Even if I could stop him, this is bigger than me now. He's part of this superhero world, and he's my boy, which means so am I. They all could have died today without Spider-Man. The Avengers, the townspeople. Sure, maybe they'd have figured it out without Peter. Maybe they still could have won the day. But maybe they wouldn't have. He was a kid, yes, a ridiculous one at that. But he was also smart, powerful, and capable. He'd swung through the battlefield, impossible to keep track of, and even more impossible to tell no. May was right. No one was stopping Peter. Natasha knew the dark underbelly of this world better than most. Powerful enough to rival the Avengers, but young enough to be easily manipulated. It was a miracle that Tony found him first. I'll look out for him too, then. The whole team would. It was a promise. Shortly after Natasha and May left, Steve found himself alone in the Avengers Hospital parking lot with Sam. The Quinjet engulfed the black pavement, which was empty of cars save for a blue bug belonging to Helen Cho. Sam leaned against the building wall. Steve could feel his gaze interrogating him. What is it? We're all just going to be okay with this then? You met him today, right? Steve said. You think you could convince him to quit? Sam laughed and shook his head. I imagine that'd go about as well as Bucky trying to stop you from joining the army. Steve grinned. Exactly. We still need to talk about this, though. The whole team does. I know, he said. What's his name? Peter. Huh. Sam folded his arms and looked to the horizon. I was thinking, I imagine we'd all feel a bit better about this if the team established a playbook for this kind of thing. I doubt Peter will be the last underage super kid we meet. It was a good suggestion. I'll bring it up with Tony. It's not a request. I know. Good. Tony reintroduced Peter to the Avengers. Peter, not Spider-Man. The team adored him just as before, if not more. Peter also talked as much as before, if not more. He fired at each person with dozens of questions about aliens and superpowers. Somehow, Clint found out Peter liked Legos. He left the building for 5 minutes and returned with 3 bins. Tony didn't ask where he got them. Everyone crowded round Peter's bed, laughing and learning to build a Star Destroyer. In that moment, Tony could forget the resentments. He could forget the complicated history, the arguments. They were just friends. Because, despite everything, that's what the Avengers always had been. Now Tony stood at a wall-height window overlooking the compound across the street, lost in thought. Steve appeared next to him. Tony knew he would. They didn't say anything for a few minutes. What more was there to say? Steve broke the silence. We need to have a team meeting about all of this. Yeah, I know. Sam thinks we should come up with guidelines for in the future. And for now, with Peter, he's not going to be the last kid. Tony whipped his head so hard he heard his neck crack.
I'm not giving anything about Spider-Man to the government. That's not a fine line in the sand, Rogers. It's a line in fucking stone. Don't cross it.
I didn't say government, Steve said, kindly not pointing out that it was Tony who brought Peter into a fight about government and regulations in the first place. It's for us, as a team of people, a team of friends, deciding what we're going to do in future situations, and in this current situation right now, with that kid. He gestured down the hall towards Peter's hospital room. Right there. Tony chewed on that for a moment. It made sense.
Fine.
Steve folded his hands behind his back. The familiar angle of his jaw stuck forward, but Tony knew that look. He wasn't being a hardhead. He was thinking about something.
What is it?
I think we got off on the wrong foot in 2012. He scoffed.
Yeah, no kidding.
It hadn't been all bad, of course, but there was always tension. Ever since I became Captain America, that's all people see. People don't see me. It's like they forget I exist. Steve Rogers, I mean. Especially since I came out of the ice. People who knew me before are all dead, except Bucky. He didn't say it, unwilling to bring up that point of tension, and rightly so. They'd deal with it later, though. Maybe Tony could learn to be a bigger person, too. You and I have never met. Not really. I met Iron Man, and you met Captain America. I think we need to fix that. Tony chewed on that. He looked at Steve. Really looked at him for maybe the first time. He hadn't always been so tall, had he? The history books said he used to be 5'4" and weighed 94 pounds. He saw the pictures. For whatever reason, that Steve never clicked with this Steve. It was the past, just like World War II was the past. But that little guy was still in there, wasn't he? It wasn't the past to Steve. It hurt to think about. They'd known each other so well, but had they? He came into his first meeting with Steve with a lot of expectations and Howard Stark-related baggage. None of that was on Steve. It's not like he told Howard, hey, when you have a kid, make sure to criticize him as much as possible while bragging about me. And Steve? He'd gone in with what he saw on TV, the show Tony put on. Arrogant, charismatic. It was a damn good show, too. Tony didn't blame him. Maybe they'd both gotten a few glimpses underneath at the real versions of each other, but never more than that. Glimpses. I'm not saying we won't still disagree on stuff, Steve added. Steve Rogers is twice as big a shithead as Captain America. But at least we can understand each other. Tony laughed.
That's bad language, you know.
Steve laughed too. That's what I mean, actually. I do know how to swear. I was in the army. Before that, I picked fights in alleyways. I'm not a goody two-shoes American poster boy. I never have been. I'm a stick in the mud about my moral code, but I don't give a shit about rules. I only care about doing the right thing. That checked out. It explained some things, even. Okay, Tony said. Yeah, let's try it. Steve held out his hand. Steve Rogers. Tony took it. Tony Stark. I promise my head isn't as big as it looks. I have a massive guilt complex and a terrible self-destructive streak. Steve smiled a full, genuine smile. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. That wouldn't be the end of it, of course. There'd be team meetings and arguing. There'd be Peter being a pain in the ass. But it was a start. Tony could live with that. End of chapter and end of fic. As always, Thank you to Spidergirl1809 for writing this wonderful fic and for letting me do a narration of it. I love this fic. I've read it several times. It's always funny, it's always touching, it's always just such a good read. Please, if you enjoyed it, do head over to their page. The links are around here somewhere. Go leave them some love, leave them some praise, leave them some kudos. Leave them encouragement, because I'd like to see them write more in the future. And to be perfectly frank, they deserve it for giving us this sort of content. In any case, have a lovely day or night, whatever it is for you. Bye bye!